Cedar Fair is a chain home to some of the biggest roller coaster collections in the world, with parks like Cedar Point and Kings Island. Well, last week I hit one of their smaller parks, but it's the closest one to me, Dorney Park. Now it's home to 8 operating credits, and here is my experience of my second trip to the small-scale amusement park. We were let in 10 to 11 when the park was set to open and rope dropped the wild mouse to the park. It was the one of the 2 missing credits I had besides the kiddie coaster, and afterwards we grabbed a ride on Talon before moving to Hydra, then Thunderhawk. We had to wait till noon for Demon Drop to open, so we backtracked for the second new credit of the day. Then we grabbed a pair of rides on Possessed, 2 on Steel Force, and broke for lunch. After lunch, we headed back for re-rides on Hydra and Talon before grabbing Dippin' Dots and dipping out. Overall, we grabbed 11 rides and about 3 or so hours at the park. Now, first things, we went on a Sunday so the haunt events weren't happening and the park closed at 7 overall. So there wasn't really much time for haunts even if they did them, but luckily this kept most of the older crowds away as the only longer lines were really on the rides geared towards families and things like the Wild Mouse. Now, we were able to secure front and back row rides pretty much whenever we wanted, and mostly we were just waiting on, a 2-train wait here and there for front rows like Steel Force. Now, most rides we could simply cycle back to another row and re-ride if we wanted to. However, I have to say that the operations really weren't anything to brag about overall. Trains constantly stacked on every ride, especially when they were only trying to fill about half the rows. It can be a little frustrating and annoying. But it was a quiet day overall, so it wasn't too bad. It didn't really affect any kind of waiting. I would just be worried if the same operations occurred on, say, a Saturday. With the haunt going on, lines could get pretty long on those major rides. But I was relieved to see multiple trains running on every coaster, especially seeing how quiet it was that day. The park did start to fill up as the day went on, but we were able to run through all the credits pretty quickly. Now, we elected to skip the flat rides because it was chilly and a little bit rainy and we wanted to beat the traffic, but didn't work anyway because New York City on a Sunday afternoon is terrible. As for food, we stopped at the smaller Chickies and Pete's in the park. It was fine. I was a little upset they forgot the seasoning on my fries, and since I went to college next to one of the bars, I really craved those crab fries. But overall, the food options here in general just seem completely standard for theme parks. But they did have some of their seasonal haunt booths open where you can have special beers and custom dishes, so that's a little nice. Now, the haunt sets themselves looked pretty cool, but in daylight without the actors, it's kind of hard to get a full feel of the experience. I don't know if I'd come here for the haunt. I feel like it's better for a larger park like Great Adventure, but it still seemed pretty nice. Now, overall, I really don't love this park. It really feels like a small scale park trying to act like one of the bigger ones. Now, my biggest gripe is the actual lack of new additions over the years. Everything feels like it hasn't been updated in a while, and with their latest coaster being removed already, it kind of shows. Talon feels like the most modern of the bunch, but when compared to parks in the area, it's dwarfed by Great Adventure and Hershey, and then you have Knoebels, just feels more unique as a small park. With all that said though, the park is at least worth a visit, but it isn't really a park I think I would go out of my way to travel for if it was much further away. Now, the park itself looks pretty decent. The hilly terrain and the odd layout stand out a little memorable parts of the environment. Talon and Steel Force feel like they're tucked away in a little bit of odd locations, so if it's your first time visiting, it might be a little hard to find the entrance, especially on Talon. It's back behind all the game booths, which just seems like an odd place to put it. Now, overall, it really isn't a fair fight, but this is definitely the lowest of the 4 Cedar Fair parks I've been to. Cedar Point, Kings Island, and Kings Dominion are just treated better by the chain, but still, Dorney seems like it's just the bad parts of these parks. I really hope that rumored shuttle wooden coaster eventually comes to the park to give it a little bit of that unique and standout ride that it's really missing. Everything here just seems like a rehash of things you can find at other parks in the area. Till then, there really isn't enough here to justify coming back more than every few years just to get some re-rides on things. Now, that being said, I don't know if this park really justifies a large-scale investment like a lot of other Cedar Fair parks does. The chain might look at this park and see it surrounded by parks like Great Adventure and Hershey and Knoebels and American Dream, and even Six Flags New England isn't too far away, and really think that it's not going to pull crowds even if they were to add a moderate thrill coaster. I think it would take something pretty substantial to put this park on the map. Now, growing up, I remember seeing commercials for this park all the time, trying to compete with a park like Great Adventure, but it's just not the same level of theme park. And that's okay, there are room for smaller parks across the country. But like I said earlier, it just seems like this park is kind of going for a vibe where it wants to be treated as one of those major destination parks that you can spend more than an afternoon at. But really, anything more than a couple hours at this park is a little too much for me. Now next week, I'll dive much deeper into the lineup overall and rank out all these coasters. But till then, what do you think of Dorney Park? Should Cedar Fair really dive in and invest more into the park? Or does it just not stand a chance to pull crowds against those bigger parks in the area? So let me know what you think. Until next week, that's all from the shores of Island Coasters.